When I write an absolute value equation, the form I'm going to want to use is this. Y equals A times the absolute value of x minus h, and then plus k. So there's a few things I'm going to want to do first once I realize that's the form I'm going to use. And probably the first thing I would do is I want to make a quick sketch of this graph. Having a visual of what's going on will help me determine a couple things about what the equation will look like. So they've given me 2 points of interest, I suppose. One of them is the vertex, which is at 5, 8. So I don't really need an accurate graph. I just want to make a sketch of this. So 5, 8, it's going to be somewhere up here. So I'm just going to put a point somewhere up there in that first quadrant. That's really all I need to know about it. And then there's another point on the graph at 0, 0 at the origin. So here's what this has told me so far. Knowing the vertex is up there and my point on the graph is down at 0, 0, I know my absolute value equation is going to look something like that, which right away tells me a little bit about the a value. Since the graph is flipped or reflected, it's going to tell me that the a value has to be negative. So I'll make a little note about that. A is going to be negative. Okay? So once I note that, here's the next thing that I would probably do. The vertex actually are 2 numbers that are going to serve us in the equation, or tell us numbers to use in this equation right here. That vertex, remember, represents the h and the k values. So I have 2 of the 3 variables I need to find just by looking at the vertex. So I can start to write out as much as I know. I've got y equals a times the absolute value of x. Now remember, h has to be opposite, so since it's a positive 5 in your equation, I'm going to write a negative 5. You can also think in terms of shifting. That shift is going to, negative 5 is going to shift the graph 5 spaces to the right, which is where the vertex moved. And then the k value is just what it says, so positive 8. That will shift the graph up 8. From here, there's a couple options you can use to find the a value. I'll show you both of those options and you can decide which method you like better. So at this point, one of our options would be, let's take this point 0, 0 and use that as our x. It looks like a face. We can take that point 0, 0 and use that as our x and y to solve for a. Using this method will always get you the right sign of the a value, assuming you do it right. But then I'll show you the other method that I like to use to find the a value as well. So I plugged in my point for x and y. Let's go ahead and work this out. So I've got 0 equals a times the absolute value of negative 5, and remember what absolute value means, and then plus 8. So be careful here. People start thinking this is a minus 5, and that's not the case. It's a times the absolute value of negative 5. So I'm going to rewrite this. Oops, that's supposed to be in 0. So 0 equals, well, since the absolute value of negative 5 is 5, I'm just going to write that as 5 times a. People make big mistakes at that point because they try to do a minus 5, and then plus 8. From here, it's just a simple matter of solving for a, so I'll subtract 8 from both sides, and then I'll divide by 5, and there's my a value of negative 8 over 5. And it fits with what our sketch said. Our sketch said our a value had to be negative, remember? And so our a value is indeed negative. So knowing that, I'm going to go ahead and finish writing my equation. I've got y equals, the a value is negative 8 over 5 times the absolute value of x minus 5, and then a plus 8 at the end. So there's my equation. If that method works for you, go ahead and use that method by plugging in the point. Otherwise, let me show you the other way to get the a value. If you use this second method to find your a value, you just got to be really careful that you note what your a value is supposed to be, because depending on how you do this, you may get a positive or a negative a value. You just have to manually put that sign on. So here's what I do. Since the sides of this absolute value graph are really just lines, we can kind of find the slope of these lines and just know that our a value needs to be negative when we're done. So I'm going to use the points they gave me, 8, 5. Was that it, or was it backwards? Oops, sorry, backwards. Reverse that. 5, 8, and then the other point is 0, 0. And I'm just going to do the slope formula, y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. So I'll do 8 minus 0 over 5 minus 0, and I end up with 8 over 5. Now this is where I said you have to be careful, because we said the a value is going to be negative since our graph is flipped. So depending on how you subtract, you may or may not get the right sign when you do this one. So you have to manually adjust your signs. Since my graph is flipped, it's reflected, I know that my a value has to become negative. So there's the a value, negative 8/5. I could now go ahead and write my equation. Or if you are fine with that method over there, there's our negative 8/5 as well. 8/5 as well. Either way, there is the equation of the absolute value graph that fits that criteria.